Hey guys, welcome back to Warp. We are so excited today. We have an exclusive interview from recording artist and worship leader Corey Voss. He just recently released his brand new live album this past Friday called Songs of Heaven and Earth. Can't wait for you to see this interview. Hey guys, thanks again for spending time with us today. If you haven't already, make sure you like and subscribe. Also, you can follow us on Instagram at warp_inc for more information. Super excited to jump into our interview with Corey Voss. But before we do that, I want to introduce you guys to my sidekick, Brandon White. Brandon, say hello.
Hello. How are you guys doing?
Brandon, it is so good to have you here. Brandon is actually the guy behind the curtain, working the machines and pulling the levers, making sure everything looks good. He's doing the switching and all that kind of stuff. Brandon, why don't you tell everyone real quick just what you do?
Yeah, I'm on staff at Freedom Church. I run front of house as an audio position on Sundays. I do a lot of our lighting program and cue lists throughout the week, video editing, anything really in production side of things.
You pick up coffee, dry cleaning,
Yeah.
everything that a good production assistant should
Help
do.
shave people's heads, whatever's needed.
Okay, well, Brandon, also don't forget I have this mute button here where I can turn you off at any time that I need to. And you know what? Let's just go ahead and jump right into the interview with Corey. Well, hey guys, I'm super excited to have a brand new friend on with us today for one of our first interviews of worship leaders and people who are doing production just like you all over the country. Very special guest today, Corey Voss, who's with us and just released a brand new album this past Friday called Songs of Heaven and Earth. Is that right?
Yes,
It's an incredible album, but Corey's taken a few minutes out of his schedule just to be with us, answer some questions, and so we're excited to get to have him on here today. Corey, thank you so much for jumping in with us and talking to us for a little bit. Tell us a little bit about your story, man, your faith journey, how you got involved in worship. And
Well, let's see. I got started leading worship kind of young when I was about 15. I gave my life to the Lord when I was 15. And then I joined a local church and started, just attending. And then within a year of being there, I started leading worship. And then within 2 years of being there, I ended up becoming the worship leader of that particular youth ministry. And then when I turned 18, I moved to Lakeland, Florida to go to Southeastern University. And I studied church ministries while I was there. And it was just awesome. It was really, that was definitely a turning point in my life,
yeah.
And while I was at Southeastern, I led worship on campus, and I traveled with their touring worship teams. And I started writing songs while I was at Southeastern. And then I got involved in a local church down in Auburndale, Florida, which is like right by Lakeland. And so God just kind of had me right in the mix with, worship and writing. And it's always something that I was just actually telling someone else this morning, the first time that I encountered God was in a worship service, like at the youth group that I was at when I was in 15. And
Nice.
that's when I really felt, just called to lead worship and called to ministry. And I just knew, I was like, if I can be so impacted by God through music and worship, I want to do this and help other people as well.
Awesome, man. That's
So
awesome.
it's been, so I grew up in Indiana. I didn't say that part, but I grew up in Northwest Indiana.
Nice.
And then moved all the way south to Florida, and then now I'm in Tennessee.
I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio, so I wasn't quite in the Midwest. But did you guys say pop, or was it soda or Coke or?
Pop. Yeah.
That took me the longest time to stop saying pop, and I still get teased about it. But that's awesome, man. And now you're the worship arts pastor at Gateway Church.
In Shelbyville, Tennessee.
That's awesome, man. So leading your worship team and all that kind of stuff. Tell us about this new album.
The process was very interesting. I decided about, 2 years ago, I decided it was time to start working on another record. And I was actually in Florida at the time with one of my co-writers, Brian Shirley. She wrote on The King Is Here and a couple other songs on the project. And we were in the car driving, and she was like, "Hey, She's like, you know what you should call your next project? And I was like, what? She's like, you need to call it Heaven and Earth, or something about Heaven and Earth.
Nice.
Because, you know, I just think that'd be so awesome. And you should do like 2 EPs and like split it up and all this stuff. And it was one of those conversations where it was like, she's really listening. Like she's hearing from the Lord right now. And like, you know, it just wasn't just like we're shooting around ideas. It was really like a God moment. And so, you know, I kind of started praying about it, and I'd already been writing songs. I write consistently. And so I'd had a few songs already that I was like wanting to put on the project, but I also knew there was going to be a need to write more songs. And so, yeah, through that process, it was the writing process. Honestly, like some of the songs on the project go back about 3 to 4 years ago. So, you know, some of them have been around for a while, just haven't been recorded. And so I, you know, went ahead and like called my producer, Kyle Lee. He's a good friend of mine. He actually produces for Leland and a guy named Dustin Smith. And I called him and I was like, hey, Kyle, I really want to do a project. Would you be interested? And he's like, yeah, when do you want to do it? And I was like, in 3 weeks. Like I literally wanted to do a live recording in 3 weeks from the time I called him. And he's like,
Nice.
come to my house right now. So we talked and like went through all the songs, and we stayed up till like midnight one night going through all the songs and scheduled a live recording for 3 weeks later. And
Wow.
I did a GoFundMe and just stepped out in faith, and I was like, we're going to do this. And the night of the live recording, we did about 3 days of pre-production in the studio just to get some arrangements and stuff in place.
Right.
And then the night of the live recording, I actually lost my voice, which was pretty awful.
Dude,
But
what a nightmare.
at the same time, it was a struggle, you know, to push through. But what was really cool about it, though, is that it actually allowed the people to not depend on me, if that makes sense. Like they actually started like finding their own voice that night, which was really cool. They didn't know about half the songs that we recorded, but there was definitely a lot of like, you know, a lot that went into it. So,
you know, like we've done 3 live albums here, and getting that crowd sound on a live album is really hard.
yes.
And so I imagine that was actually helpful, like you were saying, that they were loud, because the you know, you do overdubs and stuff, and I don't know if you did overdubs, but it's always hard to recapture a crowd sound. I mean, you can have people in the room and all that kind of stuff, but it sounds great on your album. That's awesome, man.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
So, Corey, tell us just a little bit. You know, I know a lot of worship teams are getting into writing songs for their churches, trying to have that original voice and stuff. Tell us a little bit about your writing process. Do you write alone? Do you like to write with others? Do you schedule time to write? You know, what's your process?
Yeah, kind of all the above, but I don't write alone as much as I used to, just because like living close to Nashville, the culture of Nashville is very much co-writing.
Yeah.
And so my publishers over at Integrity, like they'll book rights for me regularly. Like they'll call me and ask me, hey, can you do this right? Do that right?
Oh,
And
cool.
so I'll go, you know, it's an hour drive for me, and I'll usually try to book a couple in a day and go spend the whole day writing. And usually that process, like depending on who I'm writing with, like if I don't know them, I'll show up with an idea. But if I know them and I write with them regularly, we'll just show up and start from scratch usually. And sometimes like songs are written out of like one of my co-writers on the album, Chrissy Nordoff, she and I do like a lot of spontaneous worship stuff.
Oh, cool.
And so like I'll show up and we'll just play something on the piano and she'll just start flowing, and usually a song idea will come out of that. But then there's other writing situations where people are more want to be more crafty and more, you know, intentional to begin with, rather than like open-ended. And so those rights, I also, you know, come in to those rights with kind of really objective sometimes.
Yeah.
Like sometimes we'll pick out a song title before we write anything and be like, hey, let's write a song with this title. And then we'll roadmap it before we even write any lyric at all. And so it's kind of different, you know, every time. But yeah, it's definitely like a vulnerable thing too, like co-writing with other people, because you can't be like so married to your ideas that you're not willing to tweak them. And like, you know, but you also have to be willing to like fight for your ideas too sometimes. And you know,
just to kind of turn the conversation a little bit more to the spiritual side, something that I've been kind of talking to my personal team about, and really just getting passionate about again, is how we're preparing our hearts, before we get on stage, and what does it really mean to be a worship leader, and just having the correct, not to get too heavy into doctrine and theology and all that kind of stuff, but I'd love to hear your kind of thoughts on what does it mean to be a worship leader? What does it mean to lead your congregation? What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah. It's funny because I was thinking about this earlier this morning. There's a difference between a worship leader and a worship pastor.
Mm-hmm.
You can, like, for many of my years leading worship, like when I was a teenager and in college, like I thought I'm a worship leader. I never considered myself to be a pastor, honestly. And to me, that sounded scary. I was like, ooh, to be a pastor, it means I'm responsible for people.
Right.
But when I came on staff at Gateway, my pastor, he started calling me Pastor Corey and telling other people to call me that. And I was like, whoa, I'm not ready for that.
Yeah.
But in the process, it has totally changed my perception of to be a pastor means you're shepherding people. It means that you're caring for their soul. It means that you are cheering them on. It means that you're holding them accountable. It means that you're challenging them. That you're helping them grow. There's a lot of things, on a discipleship level with my worship team that I'm learning and I've had to step into. Whereas when I considered myself to just be a worship leader, I think I was like, oh, I'll get up here and lead a couple songs and people will follow me and that's it,
Yeah.
And so there's a whole other side of it, and you mentioned preparing your heart and that kind of thing. That's something that I'm with you. I've been definitely re-evaluating a lot of things, and there's a lot of distractions in our culture right now, with our phones and our busy schedules and
Absolutely.
all the things we have going on, that you really have to make time. Obviously, I know I spend time with the Lord in the morning, but you really have to aside from the 5 minutes here, 5 minutes there, whatever, it's important to really carve out time to pursue God personally. My pastor always says, private pursuit equals public anointing.
Mm.
And he's like, if you're not pursuing God in private, he's like, you're going to notice it, when you get up and try to minister. And so,
yeah, that's so good, man. Such a good reminder. If people want to find out more about you, if they want to have, get resources and charts and loops and all that kind of stuff, is that something that you're offering right now or that's available? You have a website. How can people find out more and get involved with what you're doing?
Yeah, I am on Instagram and Facebook at Corey Voss or Corey Voss Music, Twitter, all of that. But for chord charts, actually they can go to weareworship.com. That is Integrity's basically their song chord chart resource website that they have started, and they're putting up a ton of incredible resources for the church and having a lot of fun while they do it. So
Nice.
Very cool, man.
Well, Corey, thank you again so much for just dropping in with us and sharing your heart, sharing about this album. It is absolutely incredible, and I know it's going to be just a huge asset to not just your church, not just Gateway, but to all the churches around. And so thank you for investing the time into the project and writing these songs and spending time with us, man.
Absolutely. Thank you guys so much for having me. I really enjoyed it.
Guys, thanks again for joining in and watching this interview with Corey. Make sure you go follow him on Instagram, Facebook, buy his album, check him out on Spotify. These are really, honestly, just some incredible songs, and not to mention an incredible musician, incredible songwriter, but he's just a great guy. I really enjoyed getting to hang out with him today. Brandon, thank you for being with us and making this all happen smoothly. And guys, again, if you're not following already, make sure you check us out on Instagram at warp_INC, and we'll see you guys next time.